Hey yo guys, what's up and welcome back to Toe Tags Metal Reviews, and today we're getting our final review of the album called Virus from Haken. Alright, so Haken dropped this album last week. TV Fish is a big fan of this band. I am not a huge fan, but I was eager to listen to this album all week to see if I can develop a positive opinion, and I can say that I have. I enjoyed listening to this album throughout the week. I do have some gripes, I'm not gonna lie. And I guess I'll start with those gripes so I can finish kind of on a high note, which we like to do. And I'm gonna say that the softer songs, I really hate I don't know how to describe songs. The more mellow songs, the softer songs, the more laid back songs, they really took me out of the element. And this album has a lot of soft stuff and a lot of pretty heavy stuff. Like, it's not super heavy, but it gets pretty heavy at times. And I think that for me, a lot of it just took me out of the action kind of thing. So if I'm listening to the album and I start off on, the Messiah Complex, which is that 5-part song, I can listen to that whole thing and I love it. Messiah Complex is awesome. But if I started at the beginning of the album and it gets through a couple songs and you get to a song like Canary Yellow, for example, it just takes me out and I'm just not in the mood and it kills my vibe. But if I start on Canary Yellow, and that's like my drive to work, I'm putting on that song, I always go, this is actually a pretty great song. This is nice and mellow, it's nice and calming, it's nice and chill, it's not bad at all. So I think there's a weird contrast of heavy, technical, proggy stuff to soft, mellow, and also proggy stuff. And I think that they just don't mesh that well as a full album. So that was an issue that I was having throughout this week, is that the flow of the album was not jiving with what I was into, right? If I listened to everything separately, it was fine, but as a whole album as a whole, it was very disjunct for me. And that to me was a big kind of like, this is bugging me. I want something that just flows a lot better.
Well, interesting you say that about Canary Yellow, because Canary Yellow on its own, I remember when they released that as a single and I wasn't a huge fan of it.
Yeah.
But when you listen to the album and see how it fits well with the strain, because the strain, plays and then it fades right into Canary Yellow, like they're connected, and it feels a lot better that way. I feel like those songs kind of feel like the weakest point of the album to me.
Yeah. But
they work together really well as like kind of one unit.
Yeah.
So on its own, in that sense, it's great. Now here's the thing, honestly, what I just said right there about that being the weakest point of the album is honestly my only real gripe with it. I think this album might be Haken's best album. And a big part of it is because they solved one of the biggest problems I had with this band. If you listen to a lot of their older stuff, there's a lot of fluff and a lot of padding with their songs. Mm-hmm. They have a lot of long songs, and I mean, what progressive band doesn't? But I find there's a bunch of tracks where it'll start amazing and it's like, wow, what is this? And then there's just this long drawn out soft section.
Yeah.
And it takes forever to get back to the action.
This album doesn't have that.
This album,
at least not to the extent.
Yeah, nowhere near as much. This is a very straightforward and to the point album, and a perfect example of that is the Messiah Complex, which is just masterful. All 5 parts flow together really well. There's no fluff. It's straightforward. Every part has something going on that's gonna draw you in. And the whole giant concept that this album and Vector, their last album, had is related to the song Cockroach King, which is from The Mountain. And you'll notice in Messiah Complex, and probably a few other songs too, that there are references to Cockroach King. You mentioned in, I think it's The Sect, which is part 4 of Messiah Complex, there's these vocals kind of overlapping each other. Mm-hmm. And it hit me, after, I went and listened to Cockroach King again, and I came back to this, and it hit me, oh my god, they're doing the melody from Cockroach King underneath the other vocals. Mm-hmm. Why didn't I notice that before? Probably because it's been a while since I heard that. But still, I thought that was amazing that they're doing references like that. And they're referencing the melody, when the singing starts in Ictobius Rex, which, by the way, translates from Latin to Cockroach King.
Makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I don't want to sound like I hate the album. Like, there's definitely a lot of things I do like about the album, and I'll go over a couple of those right now. The song Carousel has a great solo, okay? Actually, the solos on this album,
fantastic.
across the board are really good.
Love
the
solo.
best solo actually is in Octobius Rex. That song has a phenomenal solo.
Dude.
It is one of those solos you want to crank up. But Messiah Complex 2 through 5 are really good. Messiah Complex Part 1, I didn't care for that much. It's fine. It's a good intro, but I was just, it just was there.
It functions the best as an intro, though.
But the best part of this entire album is Messiah Complex Part 4, which is The Sect. So this song, I guess part of a song, has the crunchiest riffs. This is where it gets really heavy. There's a blast beat section, but one of my favorite parts, and we had a little bit of a debate on what this was. I think it's a saxophone solo. But it sounds like a drunk saxophone solo to me. He thought maybe it's a guitar effect.
I wasn't 100% sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if it really was a saxophone, because that's kind of something this band would totally.
I've heard saxophone in their music before, so I know it's something that they do use.
I mean, you got a warp pipe and you got Pac-Man in the same song, so.
Exactly. So that saxophone solo I think is really cool. And the blast beat section, the heavy riffs, it's just really, really cool. Another cool thing about this album is it's very progressive, but it's not so broken up and so syncopated that it bugs me. Progressive metal is one of my least favorite genres. I've said that before on this channel. I can get into prog metal. I like a lot of prog metal, but it's one of those genres that it takes a little bit, something kind of refined to really get me to enjoy it. And I gotta say that out of all the prog we've probably reviewed on this channel, this is probably one of the ones I've enjoyed the most. And that tells me that they kind of maybe toned down the syncopation and the crazy time signatures to the point where it's a lot more accessible and a lot more tolerable for somebody like me who just doesn't really like that kind of stuff. I mean, it's cool, it's technical, it's impressive, all that stuff, but just for my ears, it's not something that goes a long way to impress me. So this album I found did a good job at not just going absolutely crazy with their time signatures to the point where I was like, okay, I know you guys are complex, get on with it. You know what I mean?
Well,
I didn't feel that way, which is a good thing.
As someone who is super duper into progressive music, I mentioned this last week actually in our first impressions that I feel like this album does a really good job at making it not disjunct, because some bands, for example, let's say Car Bomb, are pretty out there, and you listen to it and I feel like it might be hard to digest for a lot of viewers. For people who are into prog metal, you'd love something like that. But for someone who isn't, such as yourself, might be a little bit hard to get into. But I think this album, even though it does have a lot of really interesting technical things about it, especially rhythmically, it's performed in a way that lets you groove to it. And I think that is something really hard to do. To be really technically sophisticated with rhythmic stuff, etc., but still make it digestible for most audiences. Like, that's really impressive. And you mentioned how heavy a bunch of the stuff on this album was. I said this was their best album, and I also think this is their absolute heaviest album. I remember when Prosthetic came out, and I'm like, I've never heard them this heavy before. This is completely different than any, 90% of Haken that I've heard. So I feel like what this band did is they took their sound and applied it to the modern progressive metal sound. I feel like a lot of the direction that progressive metal has been going since around 2010-ish onwards is a lot heavier, a lot deeper, harder, gentler, if you want to use that term.
Sure.
And I feel like this band applied themselves to that modern sound, and it created something beautiful.
Well, with that said, how about we rate it?
All right, well, I mean, as a Haken fan, I love this album, but if I'm trying to consider it as, for people who are not fans of Haken, you might like aspects of this, because I think it's digestible, it's heavy for people who really like that. I think, overall, it's pretty great, and there's not many weaknesses to it. I can't really think of many issues I have with it at all, so it's a toe tag for me. Just awesome album, enjoyed it all week.
Yeah, unfortunately for me there was weaknesses. Like I pointed out at the beginning, it feels a little disjunct listening to the whole thing. There's a couple other things that bother me too, like Prosthetic, for example, was my highest rated song at the beginning of the week, and now I just don't even like the song, which is rare. Usually songs grow on me. This song actually did the opposite, and I got more annoyed with it as the week went on. Mainly the chorus, it just started to irritate me. It is what it is. Another little bit of a negative that I thought was that a good chunk of this album sounds like more like alternative rock, like something you might hear like Radiohead play or something like that, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but reviewing a metal album on a metal channel, and you got half the album sounds metal and half of it sounds like it's like alternative rock. I don't know. I can't give it a toe tag. There's just too much that bugged me about it, but I do think it's solid, and I do think people that aren't fans of Haken could get into it because there's lots to unwrap here. There's lots of stuff to unwrap. So I'm gonna give it a 7. I think it's a respectable score. It's not bad by any means. It just didn't quite hit the mark for me, so that's what I give it, 7.
Well, that's a pretty good score.
Yeah, so that's a toe tag from him, 7 from me. You guys, as usual, comment down below and let us know what you guys think of Virus. If you guys agree with me, if you agree with him, or if you have a completely different opinion, post it down below and let us know what you think. But that's it for this video, so like it if you liked it, subscribe if you guys are new to the channel, and make sure to come back each and every day and vote on our best metal band in the world tournament. I'm Vile Self.
And I'm TV Fish.
Keep those heads back.